Hi, thanks so much. I'm so glad that I could sort of be there to present on a topic that is near and dear to my heart. My name is Shauna Yusko, and I could not be there, unfortunately, because I just took a new job this school year, and it's in Hawaii, and that sounds really cool and all, but it just made travel to Portland completely impossible this year. I apologize if it is pouring rain and not very warm. It's kind of sunny where I am. And I will say I did resist the urge to record this on the beach because I thought that might be a little bit mean. But I did want to encourage you. I'm always on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. This is where you can find me. You can always come visit too. I'm currently the teacher librarian of an elementary school, actually. And after over a decade in middle schools, I've gone back to my elementary school roots. And I never thought I would say this, but I miss middle school kids desperately. But I'm still having a great time. And I am also a presenter for the Bureau of Education and Research. So you are always welcome to find me if you ever see a seminar in your town. Stop by and say hi. So the nonfiction collection is one that historically probably hasn't been used a lot in your library, or at least not as much as the fiction. It tends to get a bad rap. The books might seem boring or old or yucky. And I think that that's unfortunate because there has been some really fantastic strides made in nonfiction publishing for the middle school and high school set in the last decade or so. And so this is really kind of the opportunity take that advantage of that and promote these great new titles. I think that the nonfiction collection, in keeping on theme with this seminar, this is the collection that can bridge the gap between elementary and high school because many of the titles that are in the collection are generally appropriate for sixth grade and up, and all the way through adult even. And so, really, this is kind of your opportunity to bring these kids, introduce them to your YA space in the library. And nonfiction is the perfect way to start bridging that gap. Another great thing about the nonfiction collection or the state of nonfiction publishing for tweens and teens is that you can actually find diversity in the books and the subjects and the topics. And anything from Stonewall by Anne Balsam to Make It Messy, Marcus Samuelson's adapted for teens autobiography, Rhythm Ride about Berry Gordy and Motown, to Becoming Maria by Sonia Manzano about growing up in Brooklyn and becoming Maria from Sesame Street. These are just, a tip of the iceberg just this year of books that have been published that do offer a diverse perspective on our world. So why read nonfiction? Why is it important for the middle school set to be reading nonfiction? One of the reasons that middle school students navigate toward nonfiction is to learn something, whether they've heard about it on the news or heard about it in class or read something in a textbook and they want to know more. And so I think that nonfiction offers them the opportunity to learn. These books tend to have a clear focus. You can learn concepts, answer questions, build your vocabulary. All of the things that are very important for learning, but also answering kind of that inquiry of what do you want to know? What do you want to know more about? Even though middle school students tend to be very self-centered and their entire world revolves just around them, it does present an opportunity to encourage them to step outside of that kind of self-centered view of the world. It's also a time when they're kind of open to learning more about what it's like for teens in other parts of the world. And so I think that nonfiction provides a unique opportunity to kind of open their mind to the world outside of their own little locker and their own little Instagram account. And so these, again, are a really terrific sampling of just very recent books that could offer a different perspective on the world as a whole. It can also spark their curiosity. I think it's very important to encourage students to come up with what it is they want to know more about and what are they interested in learning about. And nonfiction provides a fantastic and engaging format and layout oftentimes with high visual appeal, whether that's a graphic novel or full color photographs. They often have a low page count, and so you can get a lot of bang for your buck, so to speak. These are just a few of my favorites. In fact, Untamed is probably one of my favorites of the year, although Martin Sandler's Iron Rails, Iron Men, it's right up there as well. It's tough for me to always pick a favorite when it comes to nonfiction, but these really do sort of engage students with their visual appeal and layout and kind of that inquiry. I want to know more. Tell me about Steve Jobs. Talk about revolutionizing a lot of their world. There's a guy that did it. And just growing up and surviving middle school. What a horrible time in everybody's memory and life. And they want to know that there's a way out, there's another side to it. And so, again, books are a great way for them to see what it's like, what others that have gone before them and how they've survived kind of those crazy middle school years. I always like to say nonfiction, it's not just for reports anymore. I think the only time that um, historically, middle school, high school, any student really has been encouraged to read nonfiction is, to do that biography report or the timeline report or the decades report or those horrible things where you need to, find a few facts in a couple of books and call it good, and you don't really read the book because it's not engaging or interesting. And so there are a lot of great reasons to read nonfiction nowadays. In today's world, our students are being asked to do more sophisticated reading and more sophisticated assignments. And reading nonfiction is really an avenue that can prepare them for future success, whether that's college or career or whatever their future might look like. Nonfiction very much mirrors the reading that they are going to encounter in the adult world. And this is an opportunity to kind of promote what we've always done in libraries by helping them develop their information literacy skills and how to evaluate and locate and utilize information in a way that will help support their position or whatever whatever task they are doing. This really is no longer a world where you are simply going to memorize the facts on page 14 and regurgitate them out for a test. That's just not the case anymore of what they are being asked to do. The Common Core state standards have a lot of words around nonfiction and nonfiction terms, information, research, vocabulary, evidence, complexity, A lot of these words are really all about nonfiction and the nonfiction reading. And regardless of, again, what you think about the Common Core or whether your teachers roll their eyes if you mention those words or not, I think it's important to know what it is they say and what their expectations are. We are expecting our students to read a lot more nonfiction, and fourth grade, they're even talking about a 50-50 split between literature and nonfiction reading. And moving into middle school, that shifts to 45 literature, 55 nonfiction. And obviously, all the way through high school graduation, it's an even bigger shift. And so, middle school is really kind of the time to help them transition into more nonfiction reading. So a question I always ask is why not nonfiction? If you work with teachers or any sort of classroom at all, let's start asking the question, why can't kids read nonfiction for whatever project it might be? If the topic is a survival unit or a civil rights unit to go with To Kill a Mockingbird, why can't they read a nonfiction book along the same themes? And so I always make it a point to ask that question of my teachers and encourage them to incorporate it into any sort of reading project or book list that I create or thing that I might do. For example, and I know Alicia, I'm sure, is talking about her version of these as well, but these are my tic-tac-toe and my bingo card that I've used with middle school. I've also used it with high school. But I wanted to show how we made a very conscious effort or decision to make the names of the squares such that students could read a nonfiction book for a category and not just for the square that said a nonfiction book. So, for example, for a book with music, they could read Get Happy by Mary Amato, or they could read the book about Motown and Berry Gordy. So it's up to them, and it's kind of a student choice driven. But the categories are framed in such a way that it is open to interpretation of whether you wanted to read a nonfiction title or not. Whenever I create a book list for a teacher for a project or give recommendations to students for just anything that they're interested in reading, or answer a text from a friend at middle of the night because they forgot about the time difference to Hawaii and their student's book report is due in 2 days, which actually just happened a few days ago. I always include nonfiction suggestions on the list of whatever I'm giving them and whoever the client, so to speak, might be. This is a sample of my summer reading suggestions. This is from just this past summer. And I always make sure that I include nonfiction in whatever list or reading recommendations that I'm giving. And so you can see these were kind of my sort of top 10 for each of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And there are quite a few nonfiction suggestions on there. I always try and incorporate nonfiction into any reading challenge that I do in the library. This is an example of what Read Across America looks like in my library, and we do it in a way that is read a book about your favorite state or the state you were born in or a state you want to travel to, or for the overachievers, chart a reading road trip across the United States. And for example, this is the display of the week I highlighted California, and you can see that I included nonfiction books in the challenge and on the list and in the display. And in the Don't Judge a Book by Its Cover, which in all the years and all the reading challenges I've done with middle school students, far and away, Don't Judge a Book by Its Cover has always been the most popular, and I can't even explain why, but they just love it so much. Maybe because it feels a little like Christmas or their birthday or something, I'm not sure, but they love it. But I don't write on it. I only write a couple of words about each title, and I don't write fiction or nonfiction or biography or historical fiction. I simply write survival or World War II or adventure. And then when they open it up, they can figure out if it's fiction or nonfiction. And I think that's also kind of my sneaky way of getting nonfiction into the hands of kids that might not actually gravitate toward it naturally. March Madness, I've done year after year, and again, this is always popular, and it's taken me a long time to kind of fine tune how I do it. But I've included a section of the bracket that is solely nonfiction now, so that I can guarantee that I at least get a nonfiction book into the Elite Eight. And my goal is to get one into the Final Four one of these years. Unfortunately, the way I did it this year, my Elite Eight nonfiction champion was Soul Surfer, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I bracketed it up against, and then it ended up going against The Fault in Our Stars. And quite honestly, I thought it was going to be crushed by The Fault in Our Stars, but it wasn't. And to my amazement, it actually almost beat the John Green title, and so I was really shocked by that. But I was also excited about it too, because the kids wanted to read it, and they wanted to keep voting for it because they really enjoyed that title. And it did upset some real contenders on its way to the Elite Eight. And granted, I do believe that had a lot to do with, at the time, Bethany Hamilton and her husband were competing on Amazing Race, and so a lot of students had recognized her and then, of course, gravitated toward her book. But it doesn't matter. I think it's important to include nonfiction whenever you can. Obviously, in displays, my read box always has nonfiction in it, whether it's simply new books or whether the read box has a theme, like this was for St. Patrick's Day. I just randomly went and grabbed a bunch of green books, obviously. And so, but you can see several nonfiction titles on there. Nonfiction Friday is another thing that I do on the Instagram feed. And by the way, in a lot of these pictures, those are the comments, which I'm sure you can't read, but you can at least see the writing off to the right. And that's my Instagram feed that I just cribbed these photos from. But Nonfiction Friday is where I highlight a great nonfiction title, or in this case, for example, a bunch of nonfiction titles along a theme. And this was the Selma Montgomery Voting Rights March and Bloody Sunday, and it tied in with the movie, and it tied in with the 50th anniversary of that event. And so it's giving students something that they're seeing on TV or in the movie theater, and oh my gosh, I didn't realize that, there's books in the library about the same topic that I just saw this movie about. The Awesome Box, I love doing the Awesome Box, and anytime a kid highlights a nonfiction title, I make sure to highlight that on social media as well. This one, I loved the comment when he handed it back to me and said, "I'm sorry it's late, but I just had to keep reading it." And so, yes, you did. It's a fantastic book, and I'm glad that you kept reading it. And I love to highlight when other kids talk about it, so it's not just Mrs. Yusko, who loves everything, is saying it's great, but look, this other student thought it was awesome too. Nonfiction and fiction pairings, I do that all the time as well, whether that is on social media or whether I just grab them and stick them right next to the checkout counter and hope that it catches somebody's eye. So obviously, again, we promoted Bethany Hamilton a lot. We took advantage of her being on Amazing Race to do her story, as well as Shark Girl. For Veterans Day last year, I did Where Men Win Glory, the Pat Tillman story. And If You're Reading This by Trent Reedy. I think there's a lot of places that you can find nonfiction. There's really not an excuse not to have a great nonfiction collection. Of course, other than money, budget is always an issue, but there's a lot of places that you can go to find lists of great nonfiction. People do award lists every year. educational, library, lots of organizations, publishers, book review journals. They all do, the best nonfiction of the year. And so I think those are great places to get starting or jumping off points. Um, I appreciate you letting me uh, present for you, even though I couldn't be there in person. Always feel free to contact me, whether you want book suggestions or whether you're going to come visit Hawaii and you want to know a good place to hang out, whether you want to come visit me in my school. You are always welcome to contact me. And again, thanks so much for having me, and enjoy the rest of the conference.